The Drum Candy Podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into episode 12 of season 2 of the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have a jam-packed episode this week, so I'm going to get straight to the point. But first of all, let's thank Eddie Avakian for his intro beat. Eddie says, this is a version of a groove that I heard drumming great Peter Thomas describe in an interview. He played 2 different versions of it, one for Los Lobos Whiskey Trail and another for Squeeze Third Rail. When I heard it, I thought it was pure fire. This is my take on it. It's a little faster than either of those with different fill accents, but the concept is the same. The concept is you play a jazz swing pattern with the right and play straight ace with the snare, accenting the 2 and a 4. It's simple, but man, does it rock, and a great left-hand workout. So the gear that Eddie is using is a 1980 Ludwig Black Beauty 6.5x14 that I got as a gift from my father back in 1981. Man, that's a special drum right there. I don't think there's many of those out there in existence. The kit is a late 60s Rogers Holiday. The ride is a Meinl Byzance 22-inch extra dry. Eddie's recording using an Apollo X8P preamp, SM57 snare mic. Very little EQ, but some compression on the room mics only. Awesome, man. Thanks, Eddie, for sending that in. That's a super cool groove. I've got to work that one up myself. If anyone wants to send your intro beats, I only have a few here, so send your beats over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you're playing, what the concept is, and we'll get you featured on the show. All right, what's new this week? First off, a reminder, if you haven't already, head over to stickshed.com and set up an account. That's our website where it's focused solely on drumsticks, mallets, brushes, and accessories. We should have pretty much everything, but let us know if you're something you're looking for that we don't have. We'll see if we can get it for you. So that's stickshed.com. If you haven't seen it yet, the new documentary on bassist Ron Carter is out. It is absolutely amazing. It is called Finding the Right Notes. Highly recommend it. I believe it is streaming for free on PBS here in the States, but it should also be available pretty much anywhere. Obviously, it's not a drummer documentary, but Ron has played on more jazz records than any bassist ever in the history of the instrument. So it's really fascinating. It kind of chronicles more recent. I guess it was supposed to be leading up to his 80th birthday, and then COVID hit, and then they had to kind of fill in the gaps before they could get to that final celebration. But yeah, absolutely remarkable. It's sent me down a wormhole of investigating the records that I didn't know that he played on. Of course, I knew about the Miles Davis Quintet and some of the other stuff after that, like Freddie Hubbard's Red Clay. But there's so many records, and some of the more recent stuff that he's been on is just absolutely fantastic. Ron did a lot of duets and trio records with no drums. So if you need some stuff to practice to, here's a few that I found to be really, really cool. First of all, there's one called Golden Striker. That's a trio with Russell Malone on guitar and Donald Vega on piano. There's another one called Remember Love, which is a duo record with Houston Person on saxophone. And then the third one that is absolutely amazing is called Alone Together with guitarist Jim Hall. All 3 of those have like a selection of standards and some originals. If you want to just kind of get a vibe of how to play with Ron Carter, definitely start there. Those are incredible records. Again, that's Golden Striker, Remember Love, and Alone Together. All right, let's get over to our main topic. All right, last week was our first in the series of taking a look at different wood species snare drums. That was our overview with Chris Carr at Bucks County, who was kind enough to make us 6 drums to check out. This week, we are going to take a close look at 3 of the 6. I figured instead of just doing a blindfold test out of the gate, we should probably educate ourselves on what do these drums sound like when we know what they are. So this week, we're going to look at what I think of being the 3 most common wood species drums. We've got maple, we've got birch, and we've got walnut. So we're going to start with maple, which is probably the most common wood species in drums. Again, all of these are 8-ply. They're all 5.5x14. They have 8 lugs, single point lugs, triple flange hoops, Evans G1 coated batter, clear 300, 16 wires. And what I did was I tuned all of these identically. I started high, which was a fundamental note of F sharp, I believe. No, G sharp. And then I just took it down a half step and demoed it. So you hear it with the snares off, snares on, a simple groove. And then I repeat the process through all the different tunings. I think I went all the way down to a C sharp. So we're getting like a fifth of a range here. And so you can kind of hear, where does the drum kind of transform into something else? Where does you really hear what the drum sounds like? What tunings give you the most like characteristics of the wood? And then at the end, I just retuned each drum up to what I thought was like where the drum had the most kind of natural vibe. So once I got all the way down to super low, I just started tuning it up until I found the spot where like, that's it. That's a cool vibe. Let's leave it there. Rather than going super high and tuning it down, I started from the bottom to kind of find the lower, essence of what the drum could do. All right, so let's get to the maple drum. I've got the drum right here. Natural finish, beautiful drum. So I wrote on the back of these tags what the hardness is. So the maple is actually the hardest wood of these 6. It is 1450 on the Janka hardness scale. What does that mean? I mean, I'm now learning, after talking to Chris and experimenting, hardness is important. I guess it ultimately affects the pitch, the natural pitch of the drum. But what's also important is the grain structure and the porosity. Is it an open grain? Is it a closed grain? This looks to be fairly closed. It's pretty smooth. You can see, I don't know if you can see it in this camera, but you can see some of the grain, but it's pretty smooth. It's pretty tight. So what did that translate to? I'm finding that the tighter the grain, the longer the resonance. The more open the grain, which we'll hear in some of the drums next week, the shorter the resonance. Other than that, well, let's just take a listen. So here's the 5.5x14 maple drum, high to low. Now here's where I found that day when I was making this demo that this maple drum sounded best. Okay, now that your ear is tuned to the maple drum, let's shift over to the birch drum. Got it here? Give me 1 second. All right, the birch drum is the second hardest of the drums that we checked out for this comparison. 1260 on the Janka hardness scale. Again, what does that mean? I'm not really sure that the hardness is important as I once thought it was, but the theory is the harder, the higher the natural resonance of the shell. The grain is also pretty closed and tight. If you can see, it's not, they're pretty tight stripes in the grain in this one. So again, I think that means more resonance, just more tone in general, longer decay. But yeah, let's check out the birch drum, high to low. And here is where, on that day, I felt that this birch drum sounded best. Okay, so we've checked out probably the two most common wood species, maple and birch. The third most common is kind of a toss-up, but I felt like walnut would be the one that we see most often. So here's the walnut drum. Let me grab it. You can see here, probably not, but it feels like there's a little bit more porosity. I can tell that there's, it's just a little bit rougher feel. I guess that's how you would describe porosity. The grain feels pretty tight, but there is some kind of distance between the grain a bit. Definitely wider than the birch or the maple, and a little bit more porous, possibly. The hardness is 1010 on the Janka scale. Let's check out walnut, high to low. All right, now here is where I felt that the walnut drum sounded best on that particular day in that room with that vibe. All right, there you have it. I'll let you kind of make your rankings on which you like best so far. Next week, we will get into, what do we have? We have oak, we have cherry, and we have ash. Maybe slightly less common timbers for snare drums. So just little notes on my experience, which is pretty funny. The birch was the one I thought, like, this is the best of these three. The maple was like, this drum could do anything. I could use this and not need any other drum. The walnut was the one that gave me the most vibe. I felt like I had the most fun playing it. So take it for what it's worth. I guess if I had to pick one, I couldn't, because they each did something different to me as a player. Maple would probably be the one, if someone said, come to the studio, bring one drum, I might bring the maple or the birch. If I knew it was going to be something where we get to be more creative and kind of go, play a little bit more, free, or more, not just playing beats and fills, maybe I'll go with the walnut because it just inspired me to be a little bit more creative. I don't know. Let's wait till next week and check out the oak, the ash, and the cherry. Until then, let's move on to our featured artist. This week, we have the first part of our interview with the incredible Zach Danziger. Zach has just recently finished up a little bit of a tour with his new, I don't even know what you would call it, Wednesday Night Titans. It's combining pro wrestling and very creative, adventurous electronic jazz fusion music. Zach has always been one step ahead of everyone else, always thinking outside of the box. From his Boomish group back with Tim LaFave, which was again a more of a performance art ensemble. Mr. Barrington. I mean, everything he's ever done has been unexpected and really, really cool. And he also plays the drums absolutely ridiculously amazing. So David Throckmorton is doing the interview. So let's get over to David Throckmorton and Zach Danziger.
So what's up with you, man? How's everything on your end?
Everything's going pretty well. I'm in another scramble mode because I'm going out on the road again next week with my project, the Wednesday Night Titans project. And whenever that ramps up, starts off pretty calm in my head. And as the dates close in, it's like I'm reconfiguring how I do everything. And I try to, I even get bored of my own setup, So if I can introduce a new piece of gear or a new way of doing something, it makes it more, it's like, that's a form of improvising for me, if I can just have something in the equipment present itself where it feels like it's not the same instrument as it was the last time I did it. I enjoy that. But then there's the stress of, okay, now I got to, it's almost like you have an apartment and you're like, oh, the couch really should go on the other side of the room and that big armoire should go here. I know there'd be more space if I did that. And you're like, all right, but to do that, you're going to have to wreck your apartment, eventually in the end it'll work out. But that during part, do we really want to do that? And that's what happens before these tours. I kind of say, hey, I have an idea. I've been messing around with a bunch of different trigger interfaces and coming to realize, and maybe someone can come to my rescue here, but coming to realize that I do not believe that a product exists that does what I'm asking it to do. And I'm not asking it to do much.
Right.
But nothing exists. And it's just like, wow.
I just heard I found a podcast that you did, some drummer, I think he was an LA guy from 2016, and you were kind of hinting at that exact thing, that you were hoping to find some gear that did what you wanted to do.
And we're not talking about anything that specific. I'll tell you flat out what it is for all the nerdy guys and the four people watching this. But basically, I want every trigger and every pad on. I think I want a pad module. In other words, I want a pad module. I don't want a trigger interface. I've decided. I think I want it not to name brands, but with the strikeable surfaces, but also that take trigger ins. Okay.
Yeah.
And all I want, and maybe I'm not finding the buried page, but it sure doesn't seem like it. I want to be able to set the MIDI channel per pad and per trigger, and it's just a global setting for everything. And there's a reason why I need that. Yeah. That's a little more convoluted, but to do what I do, I need that feature. And certain modules have that feature, but not one of these sort of plug and play pad things that have triggers in the back. There's not enough customization of those functions. And so I have several brands of stuff and I'm pulling them out. And I'm like, hey, this pad feels great. It mounts nicely. I can get this, pads feel pretty good. They trigger pretty well. And it's like, but it doesn't do that. And then my other thing does that, but it has no pads. And the other thing doesn't trigger very well and has no custom. I mean, it's like, how hard could this be? It's 2022. I think the problem with companies is they don't talk to actually the right people who are doing stuff that pushes the envelope enough, because to build a feature like that it's not like saying I want it to make toast for me in the morning. It's just saying it's like probably a couple lines of software code built into these systems that they can implement in 2 seconds. They just never thought that could be needed, Yeah. And I just wish people making products would consult the right people for it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I hope you can find that, is eventually to make your life a little easier.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm jury-rigging stuff. But anyway.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here? Yeah.
Oh, man, I just figured Mike has me and another friend of mine guest hosting some of these Drum Candy podcasts. So I'm just reaching out to some guys that I know a little bit. I mean, I don't know you super well, but I was a fan as a kid, even though you're not much older than me.
Yeah, don't peg me to be a senior citizen.
Yeah. But I just wanted to go through some of your past and try to get up into what we were just talking about, some of the newer projects, and just shoot the stuff a little bit, as they say.
Keep it clean for the kids.
I'll try. So I will say, I think the first thing, and I promise I won't try to dwell too much in like the distant past.
I won't.
But I think I first heard you on that Chuck Loeb record. I think it was called Life Colors, like way back when. Was that one of your first kind of,
One of the first records I did for sure. How's the connection right now? Is it sputtering a little bit? Are we good? We're good?
No, I feel good.
Sure. You feel good. All right.
Yeah.
That was one of the first, I think I'd done 2 or 3 or 4. Man. Yeah, probably a few smaller albums before that,
Yeah.
I think that was one of the first, at least ones that was going to get listened to. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Do you remember how old you were when you did that record?
I think I was 17.
Wow,
maybe
man.
16.
That's
no, not
ridiculous.
16. Probably 17.
Okay. Yeah. What year was that? Like late 80s?
88.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember you saying in an interview the same interview I was just talking about, you mentioned to the guy that you talked about seeing Chick's band when the Electric Band was a trio with Weckl, and how that was a big thing for you. But it's strange to me because I was a fan of all that same stuff as you were, as well as a fan of yours. But it's like, it seems like if you just heard that in, what could that have been, 85 into 86? I mean, 2 or 3 years later, you're playing on a ridiculously high level, as such a young player. I mean, when you first heard the Electric Band live, how was your playing then? Were you playing on a really high level then, or over that next few years did you make a real growth spurt in your playing?
Boy, that is a good question. When I saw the Electric Band, I was 14. So, I mean, I don't, these days kids are already with a career by 14, right? But
right.
Back in our day, there weren't a lot of 14-year-old drummers working professionally. I was working professionally, but I feel like I've made a great growth spurt in the last year and a half right now. If you know
sure.
what I'm saying. So it's like, how do you measure it? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I could play. I could play at 14 and 15, but as
yeah,
looking back on it, here's the thing, and people had told me this over the years, and it just sadly is one of those things. You have to get to that point where you're that age where you can go, wow, I know exactly what these people were telling me. You know what I mean? Like, I was definitely precocious and I could play, but truly, I don't care what anyone says. You can't have a certain depth in your playing at a young age. I mean, you can have a certain depth. You can't have the depth you're going to have when you're 20 years beyond that. That's, it's all relative. I'm saying, when people were just like, I want to hear you become you one day and have your own voice and you feel the life experiences in every backbeat.
Yeah.
I was kind of like thinking to myself, what the hell are you talking about? I'm seasoned. I have that in my playing, and I can tell you, maybe it's easy for me to see it now because I'm looking for that, but everyone who said that was dead on, so like, it's hard to hear a young precocious musician, no matter how forward thinking they might be, and there's a ton of them out there. You just can't have what you're going to have 10 or 15 years later. It's any ball player too. LeBron James could never do something 20 years ago in a certain way. And now he can't do things now that he could do. It's vice versa. So it switches.
Totally.
Overall,
that was my point.
He's a better ball player. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're playing, the same way you just said about LeBron. There are things in your playing now that you don't have that you once had in a way. I mean, not that I've heard you slip technically or facility wise, but I mean, I know I don't play the same as I did when I was 20, or 25 even, or whatever the age was. But I'll say this though, I mean, and not that I prepare a lot for any of these interviews, but I went back yesterday and I hadn't heard this record, definitely not with headphones on, for probably 20 years or so, but I re-listened to the first Krantz record, the Long to Be Loose record. It's like a blast from the past. And it's funny, like hearing it with like new ears, like you don't hear it for so long. A record I've heard so much in my life, But after such a long break, I was just giggling at myself, like, oh, that's just a 4-bar phrase there. I used to not even know what they were doing. I could sing it, I could play along to it, but some of the stuff reveals itself in a different way now. But my point is, hearing that again yesterday, and what was that? Almost 30 years ago, for God's sake.
Holy shit.
Not to date you, but it's like, man, the playing is really mature, and I mean, it's youthful and it's exciting, but there's a maturity. I think that you were playing with those at that young age with like the Chuck Loeb record Balance as well. Like,
yeah.
I think you're playing really mature for such a young age. I'm not sure what the question is here, but how much of that, like playing in those situations, playing with guys like that, did you feel like big jumps in your playing just through the yeah?
That's really the key. I mean, sadly, in this day and age, people don't interact in any way, shape, or form in the same ways they used to. Musically, in person. Apparently, the younger generation, they don't like talking on the telephone, for what I hear. I enjoy the phone call when in its right place, but it's like same with music. It's okay to be and I love. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of these drummers who are in their home studio seemingly, or their bedrooms, or whatever they're doing. I'm just as inspired by watching and hearing that as I were some of my favorite musicians that you go hear in clubs. But I'm just making a point that it's not the same way of conducting ourselves anymore. Sure, there's bands that tour and people are playing all the time, but there's a lot of people who might go their whole career, quote unquote, with barely playing with anyone. Just virtual, or whatever you want to call it. They're playing to tracks. They're giving clinics. They're not really in groups, like really interacting over a course of time with a bunch of people and developing a musical relationship. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but they're certainly different. So for me, I know that I play the way I do because I was with real human beings in a room, and there's something that comes with real interaction, rather than if it's just like a lot of times people do things where they'll lay down a drum part, send it to a bass player. I've done albums like this, for my own stuff. Sure. Bass player plays keyboard back and there's an art to doing that well too. And I really like the creative process of that. But it's different than when you're really in the moment, playing off of somebody. That doesn't mean even improvise, but just time feel wise, Sure. Not like playing off of somebody who's taking a solo. Just how does it sit with the time, and how do you push and pull with the other musicians? That's something that happens when you play with other people. And I think just due to the way the world is, a lot of upcoming musicians don't get the chance to do that as much. And again, I don't think it's better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah, sure. I agree.
Yeah.
Do you think, I don't know, like when I first kind of met you, a friend of mine's little sister went to a camp that you were teaching at, and
who's that?
This girl named Bess Dunlevy.
What camp would it have been?
I think it might have been a Yamaha thing, if they did that, like a Yamaha summer camp, maybe. This would have been back in those days. And I wrote you a letter just telling you I liked your drumming, and then included a phone number. You eventually called me, and we struck up a little bit of a
remember that
a connection. And I came and saw you in Philly with Wayne's band, which was just great to see it in person and not just hear the record. Where am I going with this? But and then I think the next phase of seeing you would have been when I had just joined Maynard Ferguson's band in the late '90s, and I ran into you at the NAMM show when you were kind of introducing the remix line for Zildjian.
1997 then, yeah.
I think that was 98.
98, yeah.
And so I talked to you, kind of just catching up. What are you doing? You started telling me about all this jungle drum and bass stuff, which I wasn't really that familiar with at the time. I was more of a hip hop guy, and so that turned me onto a nice new style of music to look for records when I was touring for a couple of years there with Maynard's band as a young drummer. What led you to? I mean, I know what led you to check that music out, but you kind of had this relationship with Tim LaFave, that you guys played. I guess you had that band Bluth as well.
Yes.
And that just kind of change into the Boomish project? Is that eventually you guys just found a new direction and just kind of abandoned one for the other in a way?
Yeah, again, an astute observation, and one thing I never even really thought about. Yeah, me and Tim and another great drummer named Pete Davenport were all buddies, and we were of the mindset of, I've always wanted to infuse comedy and music, and boy, as you know, that's never changed with me, So since I started doing things that had a comedic undertone, it hasn't stopped, So people who think that I'm doing anything new in that realm need to go back 20, 30 years. I've only been doing that, So it's like, maybe I should stop doing that. Maybe that's what I got to do. But me, Tim, and Pete Davenport were good friends, and we were always joking around and hanging out, and we were just, the more we could laugh in a given night, the better. And we decided we're going to make an album that reflects that,
Yeah.
And so we did that. It was called Bluth. I don't even know if you can find it anymore. I do know that some people are still recently calling me saying they've got it on heavy rotation, and I'm like, okay, well, it's a waste of your time. But anyway, there's a lot of seeds of stuff that I built upon in my prior and future works conceptually on that album that I draw from to this day, just things, how things are constructed and how time is played and all that. But then Boomish, what happened was, I discovered drum and bass through my friend Ken McAuliffe during this Bluth sort of like brainstorming for that album, you know what I mean? And I was like, check this out. And I wanted to interject a lot of that into the Bluth album. And as we did maybe one or two things that had it. But so then I was like thinking, we got to make a whole dedicated thing of this. And since a lot of drum and bass was drum and bass, I veered off with Tim, and we spawned Boomish for a bunch of years. But then that became comedic as well eventually, with a variety show element and all that. So, but yeah, it was a transition, you're right, from the Bluth stuff to the Boomish stuff.
These transitions that you have, with saying that Boomish ended up becoming this variety show of sorts, as you just said, it's like, is that just a restlessness that one has? You're just like, I just want to, tired of doing the same thing, even though it might be over a short few year period. Is that a natural thing you think? I mean, I have some of that too. Like, I think for me, it's more like I can almost be over inspired all the time, where if I were to hear any drummer that I love, or not just drummer, even just music without real drums as well. If I were to hear Paul Motion play one day, and I love that so much, I'm like, I just want to play like this. And then if I could hear an old Schofield record with Dennis and be like, man, it'll be fun to just play these tunes and just play grooves and play strong like that, or anything, or hear an Earth, Wind and Fire record, I want to just play grooves all day, or hear the Krantz Band and want to play all this rhythm.
Stay away from that.
You know what I mean? Just anything. I'm just dropping any style. It could be anything.
No, I'm with you.
But I mean, for you, is it just you're ready for a change all the time?
I think honestly, it might be a little more subtle than that. It's almost like, I mean, I have an end vision.
Yeah.
But that end vision is so multi-tiered and multifaceted that I can't get to it all at once. So I have to layer, you know what I mean? So it's like, all right, I'll do stuff where I'm sampling audio. That was like in the 90s. And then I'm like, I want to sample video. Now I want to trigger video. Now I want to trigger video and improvise it. Now I want to trigger and improvise it and then redo it as this. Now I want to involve my love of food with all this. Now I want to bring that back into it's like I've already had those stages, but I couldn't do them all at once. They take a long time to figure out and implement. You know what I mean? Like the project I'm doing now, Wednesday Night Titans, it is, to me, in its infant stages conceptually of what I already know I want it to be. But it's going to take hard work, planning, extra talent that I don't have from outside help, extra resources, financial and otherwise, to get there. But when someone sees it and goes, wow, you're not doing this anymore, you're doing it with that. It's like, no, I always wanted to do that. I just had to get there, So
well,
I'm thinking steps ahead,
When I saw you in Pittsburgh with Donnie, however many years ago that was, 4 years ago or so, I remember just catching up a little with you, and I referenced a moment I heard you on the I'd Hit That podcast.
Yeah.
And you and the host, I forget his name, you guys were joking about wrestling. Yeah, you were joking about wrestling, and I referenced it, how I thought it was hysterical. You guys were talking about all these wrestlers from our childhood,
Right?
and you were talking about Kim Chi, who was Kamala's handler, but you didn't come up with the name handler, and I just thought that was so hysterical. I brought it up to you, and then you immediately hit me back with, I actually have a wrestling project I'm about to do, and it's like, and I almost didn't even believe you. I'm like, man, Zach's just a little out there, and he's just goofing around with me and playing with me. And then, what do you know? A year later, I see you guys wearing lucha masks and playing shows, really doing that. Like, so there is that level of, I don't know what you would call it, humor or whatever mixed with
I don't
music.
know what you call it either, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder. I mean, because I lead a lot of projects, similarly, like co-lead or lead bands.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find the strength or the will to follow through with a lot of these projects that we're drawn to as creative artists and as drummers, knowing that the audience has to be kind of small, even though I think a lot of things you do, you're so challenging the art form and progressing it, where people are almost forced to check it out. I mean, what is your thoughts on that? Like pushing the boundaries of trying these new things that haven't been done. And
yeah, that's a good question as well. I mean, listen, if someone said that I could go out on this tour and make, $2,000 a night or $25,000 a night, and all things being equal, you know what I'm saying? That just the money would be 10 times as much. Would I ever say, no, I'll take the 2,000? No.
Sure,
I'll take the
of course.
25,000. So of course I want to make as much money as I can with this and live and support myself as best I can and do well with whatever I'm doing. But that's not the motivator. You know what I mean? The first motivator is, what do I want to present? And then but is what I'm doing viable beyond like the bizarro elements that it possesses? And can I maybe go, well, that's a little too out there? Or can I make a smart move? You know what I mean? Like, can we do this instead of this? And I do like choice A and B equally, but B is going to get us further probably. So I'm going to choose B. I'm not going to spite myself. But if A is the choice I want to make, and someone's like, if you do B, you're going to get way more acclaim, but B is not the vision in my head to a certain degree. Like if it's too far away from the vision, then I'm not doing it. I just won't do it. Because I just know how. It's just I can't help it. I can't help it. It eats at me so much to not be true to myself on every level. It really is destroying me from the inside out. So I have no choice. Like and I did a clinic a couple of years ago where I was about to demonstrate all this video triggering stuff, and I can sense maybe no one knew what was about to happen. I can see it on their face. I said, listen, I want to let you know something. I do this, and I put every ounce of my energy in life into this. You shouldn't watch this. I mean, if you're inspired by it, great. But you shouldn't watch this and feel like, oh, I just play in a blues band, or I play in a cover band. I should have to do this because he's doing this. No, I personally have to do this.
Sure.
You all can do whatever you want and should do whatever you want. I would almost love, it's like almost like, I don't know, it sounds kind of crude, ignorance is bliss, but in a way, like if I was just happy going to play, on Bleecker Street with a top 40 group. Yeah. I don't even know if top 40 exists anymore. With whatever group, right? Or a blues band or anything, if that truly was satisfying and I was okay with that, I swear I would trade in everything I'm doing right now to have that feeling.
Sure.
Because it's an easier path.
Sure, for sure.
I'm not at peace I'm at peace with the path, but I'm not at peace in the day-to-day of it. I'm in peace with I gotta be doing this, but it is really a grind.
I understand. I mean, I find myself being like, in a way, following in the footsteps of all these great musicians I love, whether they're drummers or not, that push the envelope, and I'm trying to do my best to do the same thing in some ways, but I've been met with that where people are like, oh, I just want to hear you play the way you used to play when you had this,
Yes.
fusion band, or the when you had this funky band. And it's like, I don't want to do that. So I relate to what you're saying, and it's tough. I live in Pittsburgh. It's a smaller city. We have a good scene here, and there's a few of us that really are trying to do some creative things, but it's hard to find people to do that with. I mean, I think you're going to find there's probably more better players in New York. There's probably also more worse players. There's just more players in general.
Yeah.
Same with maybe LA as well. But some of these projects you've had, going back to Boomish and Mr. Barrington, and I don't know all of them.
There was up here with Ori Kane and Tim called Bedrock.
Bedrock.
Similar thread line, I think.
But these are all pretty small groups. I mean, especially stuff where it's just been you and a bass player, like the stuff with Owen or the stuff with Kevin.
Yes.
How much of that is small so you can make it work versus this is all we need, this is really just the vision, and it just happens to be 2 people? I mean, I thought you'd have a 10-piece band,
This is, I mean, sometimes your mind, if there's if it's in the middle of winter and there's a small little puddle on the corner of the street, your mind doesn't even go, can I jump over? You just know you can, you do it. If there's that bigger puddle, you start to think, can I make that? And sometimes you take a chance, but then there's times like, I just know I know I don't make that. You don't even entertain the thought. A lot of times I don't even entertain the thought of a 10-piece band because right now I just realized that the reality of that, there is no reality of that. So it doesn't even enter my brain.
Sure.
Would I have a 10-piece band if I could? Initial reaction to the current project is no.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to fit what I see in the blueprint for the group. But there's some surprises, hopefully that I can implement just in terms of like more staff around us with what we do to make things better. The lighting and the visuals being a notch or 2 or 3 beyond what I could ever do on my own. But again, that involves, and the thing about also keeping a small staff is you don't have to coordinate with 20 people's schedule. And like,
I get it. Yeah.
Can you make those dates? Can you do this? Hey, let's meet for this. It's just harder. So it is going to be an easier endeavor to keep it small if you can, which maybe, like I said, subliminally is why some of the things have been kept small. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, even just playing a jazz gig, it's 3 people are easier to coordinate than 5. So, I mean, I get that. So do you consider, it's Wednesday Night Titans is the name of the group, right?
Correct.
I keep thinking Tuesday because I think the wrestling show in the 80s was called Tuesday Night Titans.
Yeah, and you know
right?
that. And the whole and very, very few people know this. Nothing, at least everything I try to do has some, it's not hidden meaning, but has some thought behind it, okay? So someone could just be like, Wednesday Night Titans. All right, cool. Right, Wednesday Night Titans, great. Haha. They don't know why it's Wednesday Night Titans. Okay, it's Wednesday Night Titans. Well, almost no one knows why it's Wednesday Night Titans. The reason it's Wednesday Night Titans is because Nate Wood asked me to play a show with him at this club, New Blue. He asked me, did I want to, at that point I was mainly doing a project with Owen Biddle called Edit Bunker, and we weren't doing much at that time. So I was always thinking, what am I going to do next? And me and Kevin Scott had worked together as sidemen with stuff and knew we wanted to do a project together. And we knew we wanted to make it a wrestling-centric project. And when Nate asked me, Zach, do you want an opening slot at New Blue? I was like, I can't just say yes unless it's something I know I want to bring to it. Yeah. And I thought to myself, do I have enough time to whip this together? And the amount of time from having no tunes and no visuals, no video of this Wednesday Night Titans, from that point of saying, yes, I'll do the gig to the gig, I think it was like 23 days. Wow. I had to come up with a set of music and find the visual and write tunes in 23 days.
Yeah.
And I busted my ass with scouring YouTube videos and stuff. But the reason it was called Wednesday Night Titans is because we didn't have a name for the project, and the gig was on a Wednesday night. So I'm thinking, okay. Wednesday night's the gig. I love the show Tuesday Night Titans. So it's called Wednesday Night Titans. That's how it became Wednesday Night. I don't think it's the greatest name for a band because we sometimes go to gigs and it says now appearing tonight, Titans. Yeah. They thought the Wednesday night was from some other gig we did.
Sure.
So it could come back to haunt us a little bit. But so, yeah, Wednesday Night Titans, correct, is the name of the group.
We will finish up our interview with Zach next week. But for now, let's shift over into a lesson.
Welcome back to our free drum lesson series. This week I want to cover the Swiss Army triplet and some ways you can improvise with it and find some unusual phrases with this rudiment. So the Swiss Army triplet, traditionally it's a triplet, obviously, with a flam on the first note, the same hand plays the next note, and then the opposite hand plays the third note. Triplet, right flam, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left. Or you can start with the left. Left, left, right. Left, left, right. Left, left, right. Bam. It's not an alternating rudiment by nature, and we're going to just not worry about alternating them in this lesson, but you could alternate. You could alternate like that. It just requires a different technique. But that's kind of not the point of this rudiment. The point of this rudiment is that it flows really, really well. Why does it flow really well? Because your hands, if you isolate the hands, you're just playing double strokes that are offset. So really, as fast as you can play a double stroke roll, you should be able to play Swiss Army triplets. Because it's just double strokes displaced. That's what makes the rudiment cool. It flows. Other hand. Now you don't always have to play, like everything else, these as triplets. You can play them in any subdivision. A good one is 16th notes. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. That creates a cross rhythm. Now here's a little exercise. Do 4 Swiss Army triplets as 16th notes and then 2 as sextuplets. So 1 E and a, 2 E and a triplet, triplet. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and. Other hand. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a triplet, triplet. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a triplet, triplet. And then you can just extend it. So do that for 1 bar. Repeat it, and keep it going. So what happened? I extended it all the way to beat 3 of the second bar and then played 4 sextuplet Swiss Army triplets. 1 E and a, 2 E, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, triplet, 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 triplet. Let's try that with a metronome. Let's see. We are at 100 BPM. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Makes sense? Do it again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So that's a good way to work on the Swiss Army triplet in longer phrases that extend over the bar line a little bit, so you're not always playing these as triplets that land on the 8th notes. Now let's kick up the difficulty here a bit. I want to bump it back down to 90. So if you analyze that first phrase, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a triplet, you've got 4 Swiss triplets as 16th notes and then 2 as sextuplets. You can move that around. So instead of ending with a sextuplet, start with it. So as long as you play 4 Swiss triplets as 16th notes, it's going to resolve back to 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Right, with the metronome, keep us honest. 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that was starting. That was two versions there. We were ending with a sextuplet or starting with a sextuplet, but there are two other spots you could put that sextuplet. Let's say, let's put it right in between the 16th note version. So you're going to do two 16th note Swiss triplets, then play your sextuplets, and then two more 16th note Swiss Army triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now here's a little trick. Wherever that sextuplet starts is going to be where it ends on the next beat. So that is starting on the and of 2, 1 E and 2 E, and it's going to end on the and of 3. 1 E, 2 E and It's hard to count out loud because it crosses the beat a little bit, but 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So hopefully that makes sense. Wherever that sextuplet starts is where it's going to end. So that's if you go in between the two. So it's two 16th note Swiss triplets, two sextuplet Swiss triplets, and then two more 16th Swiss triplets. Things get really kind of hairy when you do it not an even note. So let's do 3 of the 16th note Swiss triplets, then throw the sextuplet in, then you've got one more 16th note Swiss triplet left over. It's starting on the E, so that means it's going to end on the E of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty crazy. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, it helps to remember wherever that sextuplet starts, it's going to end on that same partial in the following quarter note. So I know it's starting on the E of 3, it's going to end on the E of 4. So I'm really just kind of listening to make sure that I resolve properly on the E of 4, not worrying about the polyrhythm that happens between the E of 3 and the E of 4. But you could map it out, but it's really just if you feel you're starting on the E of 3, you're going to end on the E of 4, and then you play 3 more 16th notes. 3, 4. That one's pretty wild. Now there's one more to go. If you start, so you do one 16th note Swiss, then your sextuplet, then you have 3 more 16th note Swisses to go. So you're going to start on the of 1, and you're going to end on the of 2. Let's see what happens. Pretty wild, but again, know that where you start the partial is where it ends on the following partial. That's going to be the secret. So the last thing that I always do when I learn any kind of new phrasing idea is can I improvise with this idea of 16th note Swiss triplets and sextuplet Swiss triplets intermingling in the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, I know there's a lot to absorb there in just one short lesson, but again, take it super slow. Memorize that first phrase, and then start with putting the sextuplet on beat 1. That's the next easiest one. Putting it in between the 2s, so it'll be 2/16 sextuplet, 2/16. That's the next easiest one. the one that starts after 1 or 3 of the 16th note groupings, those are the trickiest. So be patient with yourself if you've never done this before. Internalize the phrase. It's going to do wonders for locking your internal clock to the 16th note and getting that transition over to sextuplets. It's also just a fun flowing rudiment that once you get fluid with it and fluent with it, there's a lot of cool things you can do over here on the drum set with it. So have fun, let us know what you think, and we'll see you next time.
Now let's head over to Hawthorne Drum Shop to check out a vintage Camco kit.
This is your baby, Camco. Tell me all the reasons that you love Camco.
I don't know, man. They're just they're my favorite sounding drums, favorite brand of all time.
When did you discover them? Because they're kind of a rare drum to find.
You know, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. I got like the first Camco kit, and like you hear like, oh yeah, I can't. It was just different. It's they sound like I want drums to sound. They kind of like have the perfect balance of like warmth and resonance and volume. It's kind of all rolled into one.
Where would you put them on, like, because I think of Slingerland being the deadest, right? Would that be a
The
fair?
dentist?
Deadest, like the most dead.
Oh yeah. They're probably most similar to like a Cleveland era Rogers, I think, in my opinion. Because you know that era Rogers is kind of like, man, it just sounds so rich and like not too much resonant, but like just very lively, and you know the drums will do exactly, you touch it and you can just hear like do exactly what you want them to do. They're unique. They have the turret style lugs, which is like probably the most unique lug style. Very noticeable. I have a personal Camco kit I keep here. People come in and is that a DW? And I explain, no, it's a Camco. They preceded DW.
Right.
And DW is popular in its own right. So
Yeah, so DW bought Camco, right? At least the tooling for all this.
So
stuff?
DW and Tama both bought Camco.
Right, they divided.
Like kind of like, I think it was DW bought all like the tooling and the machining, and then like the shells might have went. I don't know exactly. There's kind of some debate over that. The Camco factories. There was Oaklawn, there was Chanute, which is in Kansas, and then there was LA. So LA was like before Camco was bought by DW. So it's like almost like a George Way-ish kit. It's got like the fatter re-rings. I think these are 4-ply shells. George Way preceded Camco. We'll talk about that in another podcast. A lot of original parts on these. Camcos are special. These are brass hoops, and they're kind of like a rolled, taller hoop. They're really, really good. A lot of kits are missing those. They use like big old fat tension rod washers. A lot of those are on this kit. I'm trying to think what else. It's got a quote-unquote factory Ludwig cymbal mount on there. When I say
really?
factory, yeah, you know, it was probably ordered to the drum shop, and the customer asked to have cymbal mount added. So yeah, I did it on there.
Did they always use a rail mount, or was there any other option? You know?
I think that was standard for the like Oaklawn era. My LA kit has kind of like a diamond mount on it, which would break pretty often. I think that this is a spade, yeah. The mufflers on these drums are really weird. I can't show them to you because they're all missing. They were like, they're placed a lot farther down on the drum, and then there's like a kind of, I can't remember what they call them, but you twist this knob and then it actually like screws in and out of the muffler. It doesn't work very well, but they're all missing. You can see how low it is on the snare drum there.
Oh yeah.
These are called aristocrat lugs. They also made another lug called a tuxedo lug, which is like kind of longer. These ones are more popular in my opinion. This is missing the micro adjuster. In this part, the throw-off part works, but this is all just gone. The funny thing is, George Way is not as desirable as Camco. I would think it would be the other way. I don't know if it's because of the shells or whatever. I've never played a George Way kit, but you know, this is like the cream of the crop. Like we were talking about how this compares to my LA kit. They're similar, but like these are more musical to me. And I think like so are Rogers drums, which I think is kind of what makes them so special. And I think once they went to the Chanute factory, there might have been some QC errors and issues. I think I had a Chanute kit, and one of the edges was like mega flat on it, but it sounded amazing.
And this Black Diamond Pearl is very different than the one we looked at.
It kind of looks like Slingerland in a way, kind of like a bigger flake. There's some fade on the bass drum, not too bad. And also, you know, one of the things that drum stores would do back in the day is they'd put their tag underneath the badge.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what that residue's from. I've seen them where they actually screwed the badge in. That bothers some people. I think it's kind of a neat piece of history.
All right, let's get to a few of your listener questions. If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer or maybe farm out to someone else to answer, shoot them over to drumcandypodcast@gmail.com. All right, the first one here. Eric McKnight, how do you keep your drum kitten so clean? I hate dusting under any circumstances. Under compulsion, I can make an attempt at flat surfaces like tabletops and windowsills, but my drums, forget about it. So what's your secret? There's no secret, Eric. I don't dust often either. I vacuum my studio maybe once every few months. I don't clean my drums or cymbals ever. It's all about lighting. If you overexpose just a little bit, the drums just look super clean. The heads look super white. The cymbals are shiny. The shells are crisp, but I'm sure there's dust all over these drums. So that's the secret. It's just good lighting. Here's one from Tobias. Tobias says, I started playing with a 70s, 80s rock cover band, and they have their own practice space. Their last drummer used an E-kit straight into the mixing board. With my acoustic kit, I use in-ears to save my hearing and get a signal from the mixing board so I can hear the other instruments properly. With certain songs, I can't hear myself enough, though. So I'm searching for an affordable mic to capture my kit. We usually play smaller clubs or weddings where I don't need amplification on stage, but it wouldn't hurt if the mics could be used for slightly bigger venues as well. Should I use one or two overheads, a kick, and one mic somewhere behind me? Any other ideas? Good question. The first thing I would recommend is the Yamaha EAD10 because it'll capture your whole kit in a nice even blend. It's simple. You just hook it right onto your bass drum shell, your bass drum hoop. It's got some effects parameters so you can dial in some compression or some reverb to make it feel kind of more studio quality. And you can also send the feed from the mixing board into the EAD10 and use it as a monitor mixer as well. You just need to get the adapter for the 1/8 inch input. But I would consider that first. And then what I'm doing currently, I play in like a swing Motown band. I have a little 4-channel mixer. I get a feed from the main PA that goes into channel 1. That gives me everyone's mix, the vocals and keys and all that. And then I just take an SM57 in the second channel and just lay it down by I guess it's the right spur of the bass drum, either aimed more at the drum to get more of me, or I also use it to aim at where the horns are because they're not in my monitors. So I'm getting a mix of kind of like stage sound with heavy emphasis on the drums because it's so close to the bass drum. And then I can just blend the two. I can blend in the PA mix with the mix I'm getting from that 57 on the floor. And it really just feels like naturally what everything sounds like on the stage if I took my ears out. So you might want to try that. You could even do two, put one on the left and right. I wouldn't necessarily go overheads unless you're trying to, I just wouldn't go there because it's troubling in my experience, especially if you play outside. So it just depends on what you need to do. If you really need to mic the drums for the house PA, that's the whole other thing. But then you could just get that included in your inner mix that comes back to you. So try that, Yamaha EAD10, or just throw one or two 57s on the floor close to the drums. Put them on a towel or something and see if that helps. Okay, we are at the end of the episode, which means it's time for the warehouse pick of the week. This week, I want to call your attention to, we have some grab bag specials over at drumfactorydirect.com. It's a bunch of maybe overstock items or discontinued items that we have just bundled into some packages with, so you might get a few lugs and some various other things. So just go check them out. There might be something there that has some bits and pieces that you need at a pretty incredible price. So you can just search grab bags on drumfactorydirect.com. All right, that is it for this week's episode. If you enjoy the show, please head over to iTunes, YouTube, Spotify. Google Podcast, wherever you're getting this show. Drop us a 5-star rating, get some words in the review. That does a lot to get this show ranking higher so more drummers can find it. Always appreciate you. You can always reach us at drumcandypodcast@gmail.com, or you can DM me at Mike Dawson Drums or at the Drum Factory Direct Instagram page. Yeah, that's it. So let's hand it back over to Eddie to send us out. See you next week.